Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of A Mic on the Podium with me, Michael Seal. Before we start, I want to thank my latest Patreon subscriber, Timothy, for his support and all my other Patreon subscribers for their continued support. This podcast would struggle to continue without them, and my Patreon page is quickly becoming a great place to hang out and talk about the world of conducting. Today's episode has been sponsored by Jay Hall, who is a conductor based in Lancashire. Jay subscribes to my Patreon page at the Conductor level, and his subscription means that he could choose an episode to sponsor, and so thank you to Jay for sponsoring this episode. More about my Patreon page later on. Today, I conduct a conversation with a French conductor who shot to fame after winning the Donatello Flick competition in the year 2000. Since then, he's held title positions in Belgium, Germany and the UK, as well as starting his own period instrument ensemble, Les Siecles, in 2003. It's a great pleasure to welcome François-Xavier Roth. François, it is wonderful to see you, to speak to you, and to meet you. We've never met. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Good. And you're in Nîmes in France, which weather-wise is probably an awful lot better than here in Birmingham. We're suffering with Storm Franklin at the moment, on the back of Storm Eunice, so we're getting battered by winds and rain, but I'm assuming Nîmes is a lot calmer today.
Yes, it's calm. We have sun, definitely. It's also windy, but it's a place I like very much. So also with wind, it's fine. And I'm very happy to be here.
So I always go back to the beginning, and I've done my homework, as I always do. And you're a Parisian, and you come from rather a musical family. Your father was, and maybe still is, an organist in Paris, and your brother's a viola player. So music was around you all the time. What was it like growing up with music, and when did you start learning an instrument?
So music started with my father, indeed. He's still an organist. He's a very famous organist. He plays in Saint-Sulpice, Paris. When I was a child, he was in Sacré-Cœur, Montmartre, in Paris. My brother is indeed a viola player, Vincent Roth. And I started to play the flute as I was, I think, 8 years old. And it's not because of my father, because of my grandfather on the side of my mother, who was an amateur flutist. So it's really a chance. If I once discovered in his house a box, and I asked him, what is this box? And he said, it's a flute. He was blind, so he had to touch it, and then he started to construct it in front of me, and it was the beginning of me being a flutist. And but still, music was even before my birth present in my life because of my father.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I would imagine you experienced it from before birth all the way through. Especially, if your mother was sitting in Sacré-Cœur listening to him play the organ. Yeah, of course you would have experienced it. And the flute became your passion. I'm assuming, well, actually, from what I know about France, that maybe you did and maybe you didn't play in youth orchestras or town bands, or I mean, living in Paris. As you got better at the flute, did you start playing in orchestras at all, or ensembles?
That's very interesting, because when you mentioned that, it's actually, and maybe it's different now, but this is something we miss in France, is the trainings of the music through the orchestra. Yeah. So I was in contact with the orchestra playing quite late. Maybe I was, 14 or 15 years old. And I remember very, very this moment, because for me was such an amazing joy. I have to say that I waited certainly for a long time to be part of an orchestra. And as you know, flutists, we are 2 or 3 in symphonic orchestra, so it's not so much. And the wind ensembles don't exist that much in France, I have to say. Maybe especially in Paris, it's maybe different in the region, but in Paris doesn't exist so much. So it was a great pleasure to once being part of a symphonic orchestra. But it was quite late. The musical training in my country in those years were more private lessons, solfège, a bit of chamber music, but it was not, I have to say, that exciting. It was a bit old times, but now it's certainly different.
And were you excited? I'm assuming because of musical parents, musical father. Were you excited to play an orchestra for the first time because you'd already seen an orchestra and gone as an audience member and discovered what an orchestra can sound like?
Yes, I was always fascinated by the sound of the orchestra, as I was already not a pupil of flute. I mean, when I was very young, maybe 5 or 6 years old, I heard the symphonic orchestra. I was amazed, especially by the sound of the strings. And being part of an orchestra, it was, like I said, an old dream, because I didn't know I wanted to be a conductor, but it's definitely true. But I was fascinated by this machine, by this group of people playing together, and certainly because my father is an organist, I had in my DNA show already the aspect of the variety of the sounds, and I don't know, but for me it was something really a passion to play in an orchestra. And after that, as I became a professional flutist, I had the privilege to play a lot in the orchestras, and I was so glad of that.
Yeah. Where were you a professional flautist? As I said, I always do my homework, but I couldn't find where you were a professional flautist. Were you a member of orchestra, or were you freelance?
I was member of an orchestra which doesn't exist anymore, which was a private orchestra, Orchestra Symphonique Français, and I was 18 years old when I entered it, so I was very lucky, really. But then I did freelance a lot in all the Parisian orchestras. So the Opéra de Paris, the Radio Orchestra, the Orchestre de Paris. I played there very, very regularly. I think I was a very good, especially piccolo player. So I was, yes, and people liked my playing. So I was very often there, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. So the big word has not appeared yet. The C word, conducting. In past episodes, it's been called stickitis, or taking your first sip of stick poison. When was it that you realized, well, actually, do you know, I think I'd quite like a go at conducting? And what did you do about it when you realized that?
So first of all, because I was curious about this role, for sure, I was attracted by it. So I may have said that to some conductors I used to work with. So when I was playing in the orchestra, it was quite a few times the conductors asked me, could you conduct this passage that I hear in the hall?
Yeah.
So I was 18, 19 years old. And for sure, it was only kind of beginning and not serious at all, but still, I did it a couple of times. And then, I don't know, it was later on, I was 22, 24 years old. I thought, I have to start, because if there is a chance or something which comes out of it, I need at least to try it.
Yeah.
And I was a very young father, so I was already father, and my wife at the time also encouraged me and said, but yes, if you want it, just give it a try. So I was already a professional musician, but I started to be again a student, and prepared myself for the Conservatoire de Paris, the conducting class at the age of, 25, 26, I can't remember. And that was a restart. And at the same time, I started to conduct amateur orchestras in Paris, in the churches, for several projects, and I enjoyed it a lot. And I tried some choral repertoire with orchestra and some small symphonic works, etc.
I read that you were taught by Janos Furst, if
Yes.
that's how you pronounce his name. He is a teacher whose name has not appeared, I'm absolutely sure of this, in the previous over 100 episodes. And I always ask this question of a new teacher, or a new teacher's name. Was he 50-50, stick technique and score study, or was he skewed much more towards stick and less towards score? What was his teaching style like?
So Janos Furst is actually one of the greatest conducting teacher of the past years.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he decided or moved to become a conducting teacher very late, and he didn't live enough time. So maybe at least he did teach, I don't know, 10 or 12 years in Paris Conservatoire, and after that a little bit in London. But he was an amazing teacher. And I say that to you, he was also amazing because he was totally not academic teacher.
Right.
So he was saying, whatever is the baton technique, if it exists, is nothing. The choreography is nothing.
Yeah.
Everything you have to find is in the score, and how you communicate it and how you build a kind of dramaturgy in your rehearsals to get this result.
Yeah.
So, and his teaching was also so touching in a way and so essential for me that the basis on his experience came from his own experience as a conductor, because he had a career as a conductor.
Yes.
We can say a quite successful career, but most of the time, the material for his teaching was his failure as a young conductor.
Okay.
And he would share that to us, so it's not so common, and saying, you know, when that happened to me, I realized that I needed to do that instead of that, etc. And it was really exciting, very challenging, because every time we used to stand in front of the orchestra and he was there, he was so pressured us in the best way, saying, you know, guys, you're in front of almost professional musicians, you have to deliver. So he was not at all like taking care of his gentle students. No, he was very tough. And I have to say, I learned a lot from him, a lot. And in my same generation, there was also the great Czechish conductor, Jural Valchua, who's now in America. I can't remember now. Is that St. Louis that he took over? I think he's a great conductor. We were a couple of conductors who did a career after that. And he was really an amazing teacher, Janos Furst.
Well, what's interesting about that is, you know, we're going to go on very soon to Donatella Flick and 2 years with the LSO. But what's interesting about that is that he's almost giving you the bad conductor's experiences, or the, you know, his failures, his mistakes, the sort of things you learn when you're assistant. You know, you're sitting there and you watch conductor after conductor after conductor for 2 years come into the LSO. And you of course, you see Heitig, you see Boulez, you see Colin Davis, but you also see the ones where the orchestra and the TQ afterwards are going, oh my God. And you learn more possibly from the bad ones than the good ones. And it sounds like he was giving you that advice, you know, I did this in my early career, don't do it. Or I said this in one rehearsal, if you say that, you're going to lose the orchestra. They're nuggets, aren't they? They're gold nuggets of wisdom that you get early on, that sometimes it could take you 4 or 5 years to learn by yourself. You know, don't you agree?
Yeah, completely. And I have to say, I noticed for sure, as I was an orchestral musician, I should and I could also experience what works, what doesn't work. But when you're on the other side, if I may say, it's another thing that when you realize on the podium, all the parameters that you have to deal with for sure affects your judgment and your way to behave. But certainly he was completely, in a way, so pragmatical about all these aspects, and also so higher than sometimes you can expect in a conducting class, because he made, for example, the difference between direct and conduct very clearly. He said you can entertain a group, but it's not the same than conduct it. And the vision that you have to build also as a musician to inspire the people in front of you, who most of the time when you start to conduct know much more than you and have so much experience for sure. So all these parameters, and I have to say, the rehearsal technique. Because if something can be taught in a conducting class, that's the rehearsal. The rehearsal could be really articulate in so different ways. Also, it's your personality, it's the music you conduct for sure, but there are things which really are patterns and that you can give to the young generation just to build up their mind how a rehearse can be prepared and can be rehearsed.
That's so true.
And for sure, you quoted some from very famous names of very great conductors, but even these conductors, when I had the privilege to assist them, some rehearsals were not so great. And you can learn also from somebody who is not famous, but who is doing a fascinating job. I mean, it's not binary, and you can learn from every.
Yeah, absolutely true. Well, let's go to the year 2000, and when you win the Donatello Flick competition, and then as part of that prize, you become the assistant conductor of the LSO for 2 years. When you entered, I mean, so many times in the podcast, people have said, I entered thinking, well, I might get through a couple of rounds and then I might stick around and see how the final goes. What were your thoughts on entering, and what do you remember of the competition? I mean, it's 22 years ago now, but what do you remember of it?
No, the memories are very, very alive in my mind, because for sure it was an important time, because also I thought at the time, as you said, I kept my return ticket to Paris because I wanted to hear and to experience the final round, but never thought I could be part of it. Not because I didn't believe in myself, but I did believe I was not a competition guy. Right. And I still think I'm not. And if I remember the first round, I don't think I was so good in the first round, but by any chance, I was taken for the second round. And then I started I think I was better in the second round. And in the final round, I mean, it was an amazing memory because first thing, it was my first time in London. Ever. Yeah. So can you imagine? I was almost 30 years old, Parisian, and I arrive in London, and this city is fascinating. So, with so much light, and then not only London, but then for the final round, Barbican, LSO. Yeah. So to find the artist entrance first of the Barbican,
that's not easy.
For a Parisian, it's a nightmare. So lucky enough, I was lots in advance, so I could search. And then I got into the hall, heard this sublime orchestra, and I thought, man, what do you do here? What will you do with this amazing band? And I have to say, so it was my turn to rehearse. I went on the podium, and they were so kind. They were so supportive. And I have to tell you that also for me was more than a discover, because as I was a French professional musician, I was trained that always the conductor is in a way the enemy. And suddenly to have an orchestra and some members coming to me and say, François, we are so glad. We wish you so good vibes for tonight. For me, was completely surreal. It was a great day. I was stuck into my small dressing room in the basement of the Birmingham the whole day. And the final round, the concerts, we were two joint winners with Pablo Gonzalez, a very close friend of mine. We became, the two of us, the assistants of the orchestra. And it was really a dream and a moment that I won't forget.
To me, the joy about that competition is then you have 2 years as an assistant conductor. I watched an interview where you said you were very happy that things at this time were slow. Yes, of course, you've won one of the major conducting competitions, but you still then have 2 years of not conducting many concerts, but attending rehearsals and learning, being a sponge, absorbing information and wisdom. What do you remember of those years? I mean, you've already said that some rehearsals were better than others. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, I was assistant to the orchestra I was a member of, so I knew everybody. But with you, I'm sure you formed friendships with people, and maybe people who could be honest with you and say, "Hey, Francois, I thought today your rehearsal was brilliant," and then another time would sit down with you and say, "Look, Francois, I think maybe you need to do this or do that." What do you take away from your 2 years there? I mean, obviously it's a wonderful relationship because since 2017 you've been principal guest, and you've obviously been conducting there for the whole of the last 22 years, but.
Yes, but it's very interesting because yes, like I said, it was another time, and really slow, and in the best sense possible. Because for sure, when I had with Pablo the final concert of the competition, and then we had the schedule of the orchestra, blah blah blah. So we were in our clouds, and it was very high, and you can imagine that. But suddenly you go at the first level and you're in the hall, you bring coffee to the conductor. Do you need something? I have my score. It's basic work, but essential work to understand how it works between an orchestra and a conductor, and the orchestra itself alone, what needs an orchestra. And I spent months like that in the shadow, completely in the shadow, profiting a lot, taking from people like Pierre Boulez, who I met really there, the young Tony Papano at the time, who was absolutely so generous, for sure, Colin Davis, John Elliott Gardner, all these amazing people coming so often to the LSO. Maris Janssens, with the LSO, it was such a match together. And I learned a lot from these people. I learned a lot also because I wanted personally to be prepared as an assistant conductor all the time, every time, if I had to jump into the concert.
Yes.
So I made the pressure myself so high that I needed to learn lots of repertoire. And I think this is something crucial because after that, I met many young assistant conductors who I exaggerate, but hardly just bought the score. But if you prepare it so intensively, it's another week simply. So it was very, very interesting for me, very fascinating for me. And then I think it was 1 year and a half after that, they started to propose me a first family concert. And I was completely also, for sure, very happy, but I was scared because I didn't conduct the orchestra since and started a very slow thing. And I can say that with the LSO in my, early years, I did everything possible with an orchestra. I did some concerts in the hotels of London, some concerts with only kids doing some open strings with the LSO sections. I did everything possible, and it was so interesting, and I learned so much with them.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm going to focus on one name you've just mentioned, which is John Elliott Gardner. And I wonder whether, because I know you assisted him, I wonder whether he and maybe other people, maybe Roger Norrington, whoever you met at the time, were the inspiration behind the founding of your orchestra in 2003, Les Siecles, which is a period instrument ensemble. Why did you found it, start it? And the period instrument thing, was it something that was already bubbling away in your brain before you met John Elliott and others? How did it start? Why did it start?
So yes, indeed, it was before, because when first of all, my father is a great champion of period instruments. His own organ instrument in Saint-Sulpice is the biggest example of a romantic organ, really restored and sounding like it was in the 19th century. So I think I had in my DNA this aspect of every organ has its color and its signature. And then for sure, as I was a teenager, it was the beginning of the CDs. So I'm 50. I remember exactly the first CD I bought, Johnny Gardner Magnificat Bach. And it was a great memory also to build a library as a young, the teenager musician, with all this rediscovery of a repertoire we thought we knew. So when I heard the first Bach by also Gustav Leonhardt, and the first Mendelssohn by Brüggen, and Harnoncourt rediscovering Beethoven, all these recordings, it was in my culture of a teenager student musician. And I have to say for sure, John Elliott was very important because I had the pleasure, the honor to work directly with a conductor who thought, but like Pierre Boulez, who thought the orchestra I want to conduct doesn't exist. I create it. And this passion, this vision, this also energy to build it, for sure, it was so impressive. I mean, when you meet musicians who are not only great musicians, but who are people who could invent the new institutions in our musical life that allows them to express themselves as musicians. So it was John Elliott for sure, but also very much Pierre Boulez, I have to say.
And I mean, you go on to have your own TV series on France 2, the TV channel called Presto, which I read was incredibly successful. Did you write the scripts or did you present it? Because I've not seen them. How did it work out?
It was the TV broadcast was an idea of a friend of mine, Pierre Charvet, who had the idea of the broadcast. And it was 3 years long in France. So a very short format, like 2.5 minutes, but in a very interesting time of the day for the TV, which was just before the news at 8 o'clock. Can you imagine? And the principle of the broadcast was to present and to say to the audience, you may know this melody or this music. By the way, it's Bach or Dvorak or whatever composer. And it was for my young orchestra, for sure, an incredible opportunity to rehearse all these works, to record them, and to make the orchestra a bit known. But I have to say that at the same time, it was funny because when I look at with the past distance, I can notice that it was a great opportunity, but also something that the people were very jealous of. And it didn't make, strangely enough, it didn't make the orchestra's life easier. Quite the contrary at the time. But maybe it's because my country may be sometimes a bit strange with his own artist, I don't know. But it was a great memory anyway, Presto. And I'm still work on and think of what could be the next generation of formats or media things in our present time and for the future.
Right. I look forward to seeing if you get any of those ideas off the ground. I'm going to stay very briefly on Les Siècles. If you look at a lot of period ensemble groups, they focus on maybe the classical era backwards. Your orchestra seems to go right. I mean, I remember watching you and your orchestra do the Rite of Spring on period instruments at the proms. You go right quite a long way, I would imagine, almost up to the present day, where the instruments that people use now. Does that mean that your players have to have, a bassoon that would have played the solo for the Rite of Spring in the 1912? I can't remember what it was. That's 1913. 1913. I was close. but also they also need to own a bassoon that would have played in Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique, and also own a bassoon that would have played Haydn and Mozart. Am I right in that regard?
Yes. It's really the signature of this orchestra, and it's the project I wanted to grow and to build. And the orchestra is still, from what I know, unique also today because of this aspect. So the orchestra changes the instruments, the pitch for sure as well, from a time to another time of music history. And the purpose of that is for sure not to target to be the best for every repertoire. Even for sure we try to be the best for it, but the target of that is to travel through the history of the music, and for sure for the audience to experience. Because one of my frustration when I was a student is that, for example, I was fascinated by the avant-garde, which was with Boulez or Stockhausen. So I went to these concerts, and I was fascinated by Bill Christie or Gustav Leonard playing Rameau or Bach, and I had to visit other concerts. And the music history is also full of meeting points, or full of mottos which travel the centuries. And why not experiencing the two separate times of music history in the same concert with the same virtuosity on the instruments? And for sure, the orchestra also did develop a kind of what I call the modern virtuosity. The modern virtuosity, for me, should be to understand at the best the language of Johann Sebastian Bach and Luciano Berio, but with the same people, and not to put in boxes specialist of that, specialist of that. So it's a kind of utopia orchestra, and I'm very proud of the orchestra. And as you said, we went with repertoire which were not performed by the period instruments orchestra, like the Ballet Russe, Stravinsky, but also like Ravel, Debussy. Berlioz was already done a lot, but we have a special also affect with this music, and Rameau and Beethoven. So the repertoire of the orchestra is big. We structure very well the activity of the orchestra because it has to be very well organized, as you can imagine. Yes. But it's I'm very proud of this band.
So you should be. So you should be. I think it's wonderful. I mean, I know your recording of the Symphonie Fantastique very well, and I love it. And yeah, so you should be proud of that orchestra. Now, I have a question for you, which is only for you, because I'm absolutely positive nobody else has done this of all of the other people I've recorded and interviewed with. So you founded and started Le Siècle, but in 2016, you're also the principal conductor of an orchestra that stopped, the SWR Symphony Orchestra Baden-Baden and Freiburg. Of course, to fill in the listener, what happened was it was decided that the Orchestra of Baden-Baden and Freiburg and the Orchestra of Stuttgart would merge and become the SWR Symphony Orchestra. What was that like? I can imagine it must have been quite emotional to know that an orchestra, a group of 80 to 100 to 110 people who live and breathe as one orchestra, they're almost like a flock of starlings in the sky, that they move and fly together, was going to cease to exist. They were going to merge with another orchestra and become something else. What was it like? I'm very, very fascinated by this.
It was a very, how could I say, very sensitive, very dramatic story. I took the position of music director there in Freiburg, Baden-Baden in 2011. And just after a few months of having beginning with them, I was told that there were plans to merge the two orchestras of the radio group. So what I did at the time, and I don't regret it at all. I did fight against this decision. So I did with many musicians all we could possibly at the time to avoid this merger. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But I don't have the regret not having done something. So I did really, I think, all what I could have done at the time. And I spent 5 amazing years conducting them. For sure, the news that, or the perspective that the orchestra wouldn't exist as itself made our time even more intense, as you can imagine. But now I have to say that the orchestra became what it is today. My friend Theodore Kurensis take the music directorship. He did and he does a great job. And I have to say that today it's the best possible new orchestra from these two which could exist. And I have to say that he did an amazing work, and the orchestra sounds really with the qualities I used to know from them, which are very special because, as you know, these radio orchestras in Germany, and especially in Baden-Baden and Stuttgart, they were really built after the war to promote one of the most important thing at the time in Germany, the modern music. Germany, we can say the Germany rebuilt a kind of DNA of identity after the war, a lot through the music and the modern music. Not only German, because Boulez and Berlioz came very quickly, and Maderna there to promote and just to perform their music. So I can really see that this orchestra is shining with the best possibilities today.
Well, that's
but at
good.
the time, it was very frustrating, and at the time, it was also completely unfair. And I mean, in a country like Germany, where music is so respected, still, we have some more and more, sadly, bad examples, but still, it stays the capital country of the music in the world.
That's absolutely true. But yeah, I can imagine it was difficult times, but it sounds like at least the result was not a bad result, and they've kept some of their identity. And actually, for orchestras and even a country through their radio broadcasting service to promote new music is no bad thing, because, you know, basically 250 years ago, orchestras only played new music. They didn't really look back like we do. We look back as far as we can look back. But, you know, then, you know, in Haydn and Mozart's day, they only played new music, fresh music. So we should be doing the same. Absolutely the same. So having asked you a question that I've never asked anybody before, I'm now going to ask a question I know I've asked before, and it's about being a general music director of a city. I've had 3 or 4 conductors on here with varying degrees of, what should we say, happiness about what they discovered the job was about. Some people have really enjoyed being a GMD. Jack Van Steen hated it. He said to me, I absolutely hated it. 75% bureaucracy and meetings. I only got to conduct for 25% of my time. You've been GMD of the Götznick Orchestra Cologne and the Cologne Opera since 2014. How do you find it? Are you enjoying being that sort of figurehead for the music of Cologne?
I have to say, it's still today. I like it very much. I have to say, because the system is like that in Germany. You have 2 kind of music directorship. You have, for example, with the radio orchestras, you have a principal conductor, music director. And then you have the city orchestras, which very often play concerts and operas. For example, in Germany, you have Leipzig, you have Berlin, you have Dresden, you have Cologne, many other, Hamburg, Stuttgart. And this position, what they call GMD, General Music Director, is a position where the GMDs have direct contact normally to the politicians, which is not the case necessarily with the radio. The radio structure is so heavy bureaucracy that you reach the politics. It's not the first that you reach. With my job, the people I really talk to is the mayor of the city. The mayor of the city deciding in which direction I want to go with the music in the city, and then we organize the whole thing. And I find this dialogue extremely healthy because at the end, the politics are paying for the orchestras, and the fact that the direct contact exists is healthy. So it doesn't mean that it's not complicated. It's always complicated, but I like the fact that I have the signature of what happens with my orchestra. And also in every senses. For example, I take the criticizes very, very well. I mean, I have some people in the audience writing to me to say that they would never imagine, but they take an abonnement in a concert series, and since I'm there, they enjoy. And I have other people who say, but why do you program this music? I can't imagine. I prefer Tchaikovsky and blah, blah, blah. But I like it very much. And you can also, well, at my level, I can influence also, I hope, either or both. I can influence the resonance of my orchestra in Germany, in the world, and also how we make music in the community. And I like that very much. I like to be in charge and to experience some things.
Well, it's such a musical city, Cologne, that to be involved, in a sporting term, in grassroots, we're taking the orchestra and taking music to kids, to children, bringing them into the Philharmonie, bringing them, I think it's so important. And it sounds like they've got the right person in charge. I mean, I go to Cologne 3 or 4 times a year and work with the WDR Funkhaus Orchestra in the Wallrafplatz. And yeah, I love that city, but you open up a brochure of what's going on at the Philharmonie and the opera, there's music everywhere in Cologne. And I think cities should be like that. That's the point.
Yes, and it's the 4th city in Germany, so it's a big city, but still it's not that huge like Berlin. So it's very concentrated, and you have not only the musical institutions, as you say, the WDR, the Goethe, the opera, but also you have Musikfabrik, Concerto Köln, when we talk about music, and all these museums. It's amazing. We have a concentration of cultural institutions which is really completely unique. And Cologne, especially after the war, was considered like the most avant-garde city in the music. When, for example, Giorgi Ligeti wanted to leave his country, Hungary, he wanted to go to Cologne because he heard through the radio all the new music broadcast with the young Stockhausen and so weiter. And he thought, that's the city I want to go, because it was like an El Dorado for the modernity. And it's still true today. It was also true before the war, when you see Mahler or Brahms coming to Cologne, performing their new works with my orchestra. Brahms and Gustav Mahler did the 5th Symphony first time with my orchestra, Goethe, the 3rd Symphony as well. Richard Strauss conducted Till Eulenspiegel, conducted Don Quixote first time with my orchestra. So the list of the premiere is very impressive. And there is a tradition to have a contact with what is the modernity. And it's something I wanted also to focus in my work with the orchestra, and I like it very much.
You've listened to a couple of episodes, I gather, so you will know that there is an 11th question that every conductor has been asked, and it's about score preparation. Now, you must see new scores on a regular basis, because I know you do new music, but also you're delving back through history and finding obscure music that hasn't been performed and whatever else. When a new score lands in front of you, what is your system? Do you start, big, go in small, or start small, go out big? And for the conducting students and geeks, and even just for me, are you a user of colours, red, blue, black, highlighter pens, or are you somebody who doesn't use any markings at all? What do you do when you learn a score, Francois?
So I use lots of colors. I love colors. And my technique will be to notate the score the most that allows me to be free when I rehearse and when I conduct it.
Yes.
So with the colors, I can repair myself, either a very strange group in the orchestra, which are in single color, or a soloist at the opera. I decide that Mimi and Rodolfo are pink and blue. I don't know. I don't conduct Bohème, but do that. And then I start to annotate the score, reading it with, for sure, the patterns of bars. How is it structured? And basically, once again, everything that could help me to be free and not to be in my score when I rehearse. But I have to say, it depends of the composer, because when I didn't experience a composer, I need more time to get into his or her language. But I would start very early. For example, now I have many things to conduct at the moment, but I have a new opera for me, Lohengrin Wagner, that I will conduct next December. So I already have the score, and I already start now. So I start very early, and it can be sometimes to read only one scene of the opera or one movement of the symphony, but to try to make it very in advance.
Yeah, and you're also doing things like researching what was going on when Lohengrin was written. Are you somebody who, at some point, will listen to recordings? Yeah, good. Yeah,
sure. I listen to many recordings. It doesn't disturb me. I don't need and I don't want to listen then when I am in the rehearsals process, because it disturbs. And I am lucky, or maybe I formulate it differently. I want also to benefit from many different people work. For example, when I do, a Janacek program, which I will do at the end of the season now with my Gürzenich, and I never conducted Janacek music. So I contacted through the people working with me to musicologists who could help me to work, to give me some informations about. And I research personally a lot, as you said, what was written at the same time, what was performed before, where was it performed, which kind of orchestra was it a big orchestra, how the orchestra was in the pit or on stage, all the aspects that can give me some input. I take it. And there is a whole structure around me that organizes these aspects, and which I like very much. I learned from Tom Kopman at the time, when he did all these Bach cantatas, and I heard at the time he had like an army of musicologists around him, providing him all the materials. And I believe that a lot, that we can not achieve all alone, and that I need help also. I take the help.
I would imagine that also comes from starting Le Siècle, where you've got musicians coming to you and saying, I've just discovered that actually they wouldn't have used this trumpet in 1850, they'd have used this trumpet in 1850. And so, you're going to have people who are interested in the background, in the research, in the history. Some people aren't interested at all and just pick up a violin and play it. Whereas other people are interested, I'm playing this on a modern trumpet. Well, what would it have sounded like in 1850 or in 1913? Or what were they playing? And so, you're going to have friends that you can rely on. And, enjoy the Janicek program. I love Janicek very much, and I hope you enjoy it. I love it, absolutely love it. Some of it's absolutely so hard to conduct, but Taras Bulba is a piece I absolutely adore, but it took me a long time to work out how to conduct some bits of it. So wonderful. Does conducting fascinate you, and would you like to know more about it? Maybe you're starting out on your journey into conducting. Well, you can find out all sorts of secrets, tips, opinions, and much more on my Patreon page. You can hear over 18 hours of interviews with musicians, composers, soloists, and managers, and hear their thoughts on conducting and conductors. You can listen to 18 bonus mini-episodes that accompany this podcast. You can read articles I've written on programming, score marking, and a new series I'm starting very soon on string playing. And you can even have lessons from myself. All of this is available at patreon.com/a mic on the podium, and from just £5 a month, which is less than a pint of beer in most cities, you can gain access to this ever-growing resource on conductors and conducting. Details and links to that page are in the show notes attached to the episode. Now, the all-important 10 questions with my guest, François-Xavier Roth. Francois, it's that time of the interview where we must work our way through the 10 questions. And I start with the first two as one. What sound or noise do you love, and what sound or noise do you hate?
I love the A that gives the oboe at the beginning of the concerts. I love this sound because it's the beginning of the event we are prepared for. A sound I hate would be a very mechanical sound that we don't. A test for emergency in the halls. So and we have to leave the hall because it's an exercise emergency.
Well, the last time I experienced one of those was about 5 to 3 in the morning, and it was a hotel fire alarm in Trondheim in Norway, and it was not warm outside. I can tell you that, as we all had to evacuate the building. It was the loudest fire alarm I've ever heard. But the other one, I'm glad you said the concert for the tuning up A, the oboes A for the concert, because I absolutely agree with you, because not only does it mean that we're about to walk out onto the platform and give the performance of what we've been working on, but for me, it means that it signals the end of the 5 minutes prior to a concert where I'm at my most nervous, where I'm stood in the wings. I'm stood there with my tails and my jacket on, and you're holding your baton. The orchestra's all gone on stage, and you're stood there all on your own. They're the 5 minutes I hate the most. And the minute that oboe starts, I think, right, I'm seconds away from getting out there. I'm also excited, but it's and the difference and the reason why I'm glad you said concert was that Sir Roger Norrington, whose name will come up again in a minute, said it was the sound he hated because it was he was much more specific about it was a rehearsal. It was the sound of the orchestra sort of tuning up this melee of noise, and when you guest conducted, it was the sound that signaled you were about to conduct an orchestra for the first time, and he hated it. So there we go. If you had 24 hours free, what would you spend it doing?
I think jogging. I try to jog every day, so it would be one of the maybe longer jogging than usual, and walking. I love to walk. I love to discover streets or cities I don't know so well through walking.
Yeah,
I'm a very big fan of listening to podcasts. So, and I try to, and I listen to things which I have absolutely no idea of.
Yes.
So my podcast choice is very often things that I'm not at all specialist, either philosophy or sciences or whatever, but I try to get a little bit more intelligence through the listening of podcasts.
Do you know what? I'd never listened to a podcast at all before I started this one. And now I do listen to podcasts, but I'm the opposite of you. I listen to podcasts about food and drink, which I love, and cricket, which I also love. So, I actually listen to podcasts about things I love already. Maybe I should be more grown up and try and expand my mind and listen to things, about, philosophy and engineering. And but for now, I'll stick with food and cricket. Next question. Can you name your favorite conductor or conductors of yesteryear?
One of my heroes is definitely Pierre Boulez. No question. He's one of the most extraordinary conductors. One of my heroes who is not so well known is Hans Rosbaud. He was an amazing conductor. He did many premieres. He conducted Mozart music like nobody at the time. Hans Rosbaud, great conductor. And then I would quote Pierre Monteux for sure. Georges Zell in many repertoire. Yes, I have many heroes of the past.
It's good to have many heroes of the past. Question 5, some conductors find difficult to answer, some don't. And I'm interested in your answer because in episode 100, when I asked Sir Roger Norrington who would be one of his favourite current conductors, he gave the answer, François-Xavier Roth. So I'm interested to know who would be one of your favourite current conductors or conductor. You can have one or more.
I would definitely say conductors who are not really conductors because of their trajectory and of their career. But someone like René Jacobs, for me, is one of the most amazing conductors. Even he's not really a conductor. He's a musician, and his vision for music, his passion is so strong that he even doesn't need his body. For me, it's an example. But I have many others. I mean, I'm fascinated by Barenboim, what he does, and the musical power he has is very impressive for me. Simon Rattle is an example for me. And many others. I mean, I said already, Theodore Kourensis is a great friend of mine. He's an amazing conductor, but I have many.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are so many. That's the point. I think that's why some conductors find it difficult, because there are so many, and others don't want to miss out some names. That's why they find it difficult. What is the hardest work you've ever conducted?
So I could say, and I thought for a long time, the hardest work I did conduct was Le Marteau sans Maître by Pierre Boulez. It's for a small ensemble, but the music is so complex and so difficult to conduct. So I would say it's that, but at the same time, I can say sometimes it's really a Haydn symphony. When the music is so pure, the language is so direct that you can't hide at all. And you have to be the more honest person at the time. So it's difficult to say. On a technical reason, yes, Die Soldaten, Zimmermann, the opera so complex, and Marteau sans Maître, things like that, but also some things which are technically absolutely not difficult at all, but where, as a conductor, you have to be so intense, so honest, that it puts you like a mirror in front of yourself. And it's the greatest difficulty I find in my job as well.
It's very interesting because you've reminded me, again, going back to Sir Roger Norrington, but when he talked about Haydn, he said he thinks you've almost got to have quite a childish personality or childlike personality. You've got to be the sort of person who's very happy to spend hours sitting on the floor playing with your young children to be able to conduct Haydn, because in the end it needs that sort of sense of joy and simplicity. of course, intensity. Of course, what you're doing is important, but it needs that just to let go and just have fun with it to a degree.
Very true.
And then what you've just said adds another layer onto that. Absolutely, it does add another layer onto it. So yes, it is difficult. The point about the podcast is conducting is difficult, whether you look at it in a technical way or just simply trying to get the message across to the orchestra. Wonderful answers. Next one. When traveling abroad to conduct, what item could you not leave home without?
It's maybe something from my house here in Nîmes. I have some little objects which reminds me my house.
Yeah.
And I am not superstitious, but still I like what certain objects reminds me.
Yeah.
And when I look at them, when I touch them, I belong to this house I'm so far off. So it's very simple.
Yeah. But I mean, when I was a violinist, I'm behind my bows in the lid of my case, I, like many people, would have photos, and I would have photos of my kids, a photo of my wife, which meant that when we were on a long trip with Simon Rattle in '98 or whatever, we were away for a month or 3 weeks with Andrews Nelson's. Every time I opened my case, at least I'd get a reminder of home and where I come from, where I belong, and whatever else. I think sometimes we do need something like that. Especially if you love somewhere, which you obviously do with Nîmes, you love living there, and it's very important. The next one, any answer you like. What is the one thing you would change about being a conductor?
I think that it's a very interesting question, especially after the crisis we went through.
Yes.
Because personally, I think I always did cope with the rules of how an orchestra works with a conductor, and the seducing part of it in the best sense, the go, the give, and in both direction, the conductor in direction of the orchestra and the opposite. And today, I think that I miss some radicality or simplicity in the whole process of it. I think that now, after this crisis, we realize we don't have to lose time. So either I don't know if it's clear what I'm thinking of. I think that it should be more direct. If an orchestra doesn't like a conductor, let's say it earlier, and let's not waste time, trying to find a zone. And myself, I found myself doing much more radical choices now. And I like that. I think we don't need this all decorum. We need to deliver together.
Yeah.
And an orchestra and a conductor should be all the time a team. So it's behind. I don't like anymore these days where or when it was only the protocol or the in a way the star system, both for the orchestra or for the conductors. We need some good music and we need one vision. So I would go for more radical sponge between the orchestra and the conductors. Well, and I have the great opportunity to work with great orchestras every year. And now, after the COVID, I decided to reduce the list of the orchestra I will work with, but really to go on the point with them and big cycles with them. And
well, what that will help with is not having to go and guest conduct so much. And that thing where you are put in front of an orchestra who don't know you meet them for the first time, and sometimes as we've gone all the way back through all of the episodes, all of us have had a bad week. We've all been somewhere and had a bad week, and it preys on your mind. And since COVID, I thought I had a bad week about 2 or 3 months before COVID started, because 1/2 players became very aggressive towards me from about 20 minutes into the rehearsal. I've now decided if I was in that position again, I'd just turn around to the orchestra and say, look, I'm not here for a fight. If you want to play this, I'll just put my baton, shut my score and walk away. I don't need the money that much for me to stand here and put up with this shit. So it's a two-way street as well. Not only if an orchestra doesn't like you, please tell me, and then we don't have to go through all of this. Well, it's the other way around. I don't have to put up with this either. And I think you're so right in the fact that if you've got lots of people that you like working with, and you can get to the truth quickly, well then do it. Absolutely.
Yes, but I mean, on both sides, it's also an appeal from me for the orchestras. I think the orchestras need also themselves to know more what they want.
Yes, yeah, they do.
It's not only on one side, and we have also to make choices. I think that when the concerts were cancelled, it's really so wide. And the miss of the concerts helped us, I think, to realize that at least when we will be able to do them again, which is the case now, we have to take also to realize how important these evenings are. So it will go in this sense.
No,
we don't need bullshit.
No, exactly. But you've also brought out one other thing, which is that I remember saying the very first time I stood in front of an orchestra again after the initial lockdown, I stood in front of the CBSO and I said, having started this podcast and talked to the likes of yourself and all, over 100 conductors, I said, if any conductor stands in front of an orchestra after this pandemic and is nasty and rude to them, they haven't realized how much they missed them during the pandemic. Other musicians could do concerts in their living room and live stream them and all of that. We couldn't sit there waving our arms around with nobody playing. We need orchestras, and therefore anybody who's horrible to orchestras after the pandemic really needs their head looking at. No, I agree with everything you've said. Very, very, very much. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Chef.
Brilliant.
For a restaurant.
Brilliant.
I love to eat. I love the wine. I love the gastronomy. And for sure, it's very close to what I'm doing, because the chef and the conductors are very close in the preparation, in everything, in the event part of the activity, but definitely in a restaurant.
And also they've got a team beneath them who need to run perfectly well with your overall vision of whatever's gone on the menu or how you've designed the dishes. Absolutely agree with you. Which means that I now cannot wait to hear your answer to question 10. So, Francois, if the world were to end tonight, what would be your choice of final meal and drink?
Alors, definitively, I think I would go for a fish. A turbo or a sole meunière, and I would drink an amazing white Bourgogne wine.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, turbot is called the king of the sea, I think, or something. I mean, what a wonderful choice. And I don't drink white wine very often, but I will drink it if it's very chilled with fish. Absolutely agree completely. Francois, it's been an absolute joy. I've loved chatting to you. And I hope very much in the future, maybe when you're over in the UK conducting the LSO as principal guest, I'll come down and we'll have another chat. It would be lovely to meet you again. But thank you for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure, Michael. And congrats for your podcast. It's really such a work and amazing and very interesting.
A Mic on the Podium was devised and produced by Michael Seal with music by Ben Dawson. Next time, I chat with an English conductor who started out as a cellist but is now enjoying a flourishing career as a conductor. I first met him when in 2016 he became the assistant conductor of the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra. But until then, bye-bye.